oh, tu es ma vie, oh, il make my heart beat. Tu sais que je t'aime, oh, yeah, il make my heart beat. Oh, tu sais que je t'aime, oh, yeah, oh, yeah. Baby girl, no worry, say now you may have married. You are closer to my heart, I would take you so far away. Fine girl, my baby smarter. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Pretty girl, I want your matter. Chérie, tu es belle, tu es jolie, la femme de ma galère. Je t'aime beaucoup, oh. Chérie, tu es belle, tu es jolie, oh, la femme de ma galère. Oh girl, I love you, oh. Girl, you know, say I love you. No delay, girl, I want to marry you, oh. Girl, you know, say I love you. Ma chérie, oh, oh, tu es ma vie, oh, you make my heart beat. Tu sais que je t'aime, oh, yeah, you make my heart beat. Oh, tu sais que je t'aime, oh, yeah, oh, yeah. Ne plaît pas mon amour, baby, baby, baby. Qu'est-ce que tu veux, je vais te donner, je rendre heureux. The love is corresponding, always responding. We are in the bonding, yeah. Chérie, tu es belle, tu es jolie, la femme de ma galère. Je t'aime beaucoup, oh. Chérie, tu es belle, tu es jolie, oh.
Chat Night Africa is compiled and presented by Divine Chamakong. One more time, again. Always you will. All right, let's go. On y va.
Tu sais que je t'aime, oh, yeah, oh, yeah. Tu sais que je t'aime, oh, yeah. Je ne laisse pas, chérie, oh, yeah. Oh, oh, yeah. Oh, oh, baby, wait for tu sais que je t'aime, oh, you make my heart beat. Oh, tu sais que je t'aime, oh, yeah, oh, yeah. Baby, oh, baby, you know, say I love you. No delay, girl, I want to marry you. Girl, you know, say I love you. Ma chérie, oh, oh, tu es ma vie, oh, you make my heart beat. Tu sais que je t'aime, oh, you make my heart beat. Tu sais que je t'aime, oh, yeah, oh, yeah. Baby, oh, I done got you cold. You know I love you, I never leave you. I don't give up, oh baby,
coming to get down. I'm coming.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this broadcast, this tempestuous broadcast, Chat Night Africa. And on the show today, a lot of politics. At Chat Night Africa today, we have powerful guests. We will be having Reverend, I'd rather call him the Pan-Africanist, the articulate, Reverend Pastor Pan-Africanist, Kennedy Ejacha. And yet, we have only just begun. This is Chat Night Africa. We have another fiercely articulate son of Africa. He hails from Central African Republic, Mr. Eugene Pelema. Chat Night Africa, the power of Chat Night. Chat Night, live from Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. We have a scholar on the show to take also your questions. Professor Ben Bongang. Ben Bongang is a professor of journalism and political science in Atlanta, Georgia. This is Chat Night Africa. Production supervisor Dr. B. Tatzong Famundam. Transmission director Mombalingwa. Studio director Beatrice Famunen. And my social media platforms manager and video editor live in Lagos, Nigeria, Mr. Sir Roger Fool. Production assistants Eno Daniel, John Tanto, Emmanuel Wagindi, and Lord Benson at Fonte Street, Bamenda. This is Chat Night Africa live from Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. Chat Night matters. That matter. If it matters to you, it matters to us. This is Chat Night Africa. Chat Night Africa from Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. When the president of Ivory Coast, Alassane Ouattara, told the world that it was high time he left the presidency for a younger generation, everyone applauded. Little did anyone expect Alassane Ouattara to reverse course. Not long ago, he did just that. The case of Ivory Coast and Alassane Ouattara is not unique. Many African heads of state have, under illogical pretexts, extended their stay in power beyond their country's constitutional prescriptions. We could name here Uganda, Cameroon, Congo, and many others. Ladies and gentlemen, the news rocking the African continent before this broadcast is the arrest of Malian President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta. Here is a report by our West African correspondent, Mr. Kingsley Bazuglo.
Scores of crowds have rejoiced after a group of soldiers seized power in the West African state of Mali, a vast country stretching into the Sahara, where troops, including French troops and UN peacekeepers, are fighting jihadist groups claiming the independence of Azawad, a desert settlement region of Mali. Negotiations are rumored to be underway for the exile of President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta, deposed as president of Mali in a military junta on Tuesday and currently detained, with his son, his Prime Minister Bobo Cisse, and a number of other government officials. But now ECOWAS, the West African regional bloc to which Mali belongs, has laid down firm line with member heads of states issuing a call for Mr. Keïta's reinstatement as president. Protesters had only one central demand: Mr. Keïta's resignation. In a negotiation mediated by ECOWAS, Mr. Keïta had made concessions after concessions but never ceding either his own position or the decisive reforms that would have ended his command of state machine. The ECOWAS has already suspended Mali from the regional grouping. Reporting live from Accra, Ghana, West Africa, this is Kingsley Basuglo for Chat Night Africa Live.
Thank you, Kingsley.
Scores of crowds have rejoiced after.
Sorry for that. Thank you, Kingsley, for your report. Kingsley, going forward, is our West African correspondent residing in Accra, Ghana. I want to thank him once more. Kingsley Basuglo. Ladies and gentlemen, as I introduced earlier, we have a panelist of powerful speakers, very, very knowledgeable in the subject. First, Professor Ben Bongang. Ben Bongang is a professor of journalism and political science in the United States. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming Professor Ben Bongang.
Thank you very much, Divine, for having me on the show once more. It's a pleasure to join you and to talk about the dysfunction, as it were, of most of our African states, as it's in the news now, with the case of Mali and Cote d'Ivoire.
And that's Professor Ben Bongang. Ladies and gentlemen, join me now in welcoming the fiercely articulate Pan-Africanist, Reverend Pastor Kennedy Ejacha. Pastor Ejacha, I know you, when it comes to Pan-African issues, you are fiercely, loudly vocal. Your opening statement, sir.
Yes, thank you very much, Nidi, for inviting me on this show. And I just want to say this as my opening statement. The future of Africa depends very much on the unity of Africa. And I'm going to just bring back this slogan from Kwame Nkrumah: Africa must unite.
That reminds me the song by the late Bob Marley. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to bring you the next guest. That is going to be another articulate, fiercely vocal, very loud on Pan-African issues. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming Mr. Eugene Pehua. Mr. Eugene Pehua Elema.
It's really an honor to be on your show. And I want to salute the two other members of the panel. I think it will be a very exciting subject tonight. We are in the crossing road. You know, Africa is in the middle of many things, and the people of Africa starting to wake up, especially the young generation. They just need leadership to move forward and to make that continent a united continent.
This is Chat Night Africa. I'm going to bring back up on the platform the professor of journalism and political science, Mr. Ben Bongang, and as he comes on, we will be hearing from him for about a few seconds and then bring back the events or start talking about the events in Mali. Now, Professor Ben Bongang, what's going on in Africa? You are a keen observer of African affairs, and I see phone calls coming in already. Please just be patient. We will let you know when you can start dialing in. I know you can dial it and challenge the speakers. I can tell you the mountains of knowledge when it comes to this issue, these issues. Professor Ben Bongang, when you heard about the arrest of Mr. Boubacar Keita in Mali, the president of Mali, by, I would say, a junior military officer, what were your first reactions?
The first impression is that I was not surprised. I've been observing the demonstrations in Mali. And Mali, like most of the countries on the continent, has been facing political problems. The case of Mali is particular. You have what they call jihadists to the north who've been fighting. You have French troops up there. You have within the Malian political structure demands by the population that feels, of course, that they don't have a say in what's going on in the country. So it came therefore as no surprise. But if I could quickly move out of that and give a broader context, when you look at Mali or Cote d'Ivoire that we'll talk about in a moment, there is nothing particularly unique about them, but there are similarities in the way African countries have evolved since independence in the 1960s. You had first military coup d'etats after a period of attempts at multipartism before independence. Then you had the one-party system. Then you had post-1992 an attempt at multipartism, but multipartism dominated by the same structures of one-party states. What is common about that is that the population never had an opportunity to really articulate its own wishes, because what you have as national assemblies or parliaments have really no power in most of the countries. So you have structures that are centralized, dominated by a clique, a junta, or dominated by leaders who have been there for several decades. So what we are having in Mali, that you have had in Cote d'Ivoire in 2012 and almost coming back to a head, is what you will see happening in other countries in the next few years.
This is Chat Night Africa, and very strong statements there by Professor Ben Bongang. Thank you, Professor Ben Bongang. Now we bring on the platform the Reverend Gentleman Kennedy Ejacha. Reverend Kennedy Ejacha. Kennedy Ejacha is a Reverend pastor, and some would be surprised that you are interested in politics. Why so?
Well, the basic tenets of politics is the management of the city. So the human being by nature is a political beast, if we can term it that way. But there is one negative connotation that is being attributed to politics, and it's all this idea that politics is a game for gimmickry. Politics is something that is meant out for dishonest people. Politics is all about outsmarting people. But no, if you go in the depth of political science, the science of politics is how to manage the city for the well-being of the majority. It's how to make life livable for people within the society. That's what politics is all about. And as a pastor, we are at the center of bringing hope to people, of healing those who are going through life issues. So now, if the pastor extricates himself from the management of the city, who then is going to manage the city? Or let me not just limit it to the pastor. If those who are, and I'll put this in quotes, those who are considered to be saints, if the saints retract themselves from the practice of politics, which is the management of the city, by implication, they're just saying that, no, we should allow the unholy, again in quotes, the unholy, to manage the city. And if that's the case, then we should not be complaining about all what's going on. So we are called to be part of the solution and not the problem. And there's no way that you can be a part of the solution without being committed or engaged.
Some people will challenge you, Reverend Ejacha, that the clergy hasn't been an example on the African continent. We hear reports of corruption and all kinds of misdeeds. How can you explain that?
Now, the clergy are human. That's the first thing that we need to understand. We are dealing with human beings. And there's nowhere in the Bible where it's prescribed that the clergy must be sent. And if you go in the Bible, in the book of Hebrew chapter 10, verse 14, it talks about all of us being sanctified by Jesus Christ. It doesn't make an exception. Sanctification is not something that is exclusive to the clergy. The clergy, they are human beings, they're part of the society. They have a call on their life to bring the truth. So, but that does not exonerate them from their misbehavior. And again, somehow the clergy will be a reflection of the human society. It's just that those who are called to be part of this body, they have taken a conscious pledge to set the example. And now they should live by that. They should live by the Bible. They should live by what they are teaching. But again, even in the Bible, it is clear that it's a struggle. Holiness is a struggle. Holiness is a process. Let's all understand that. Holiness is a process in which even the clergy is involved. But the clergy, as members that have been called and set aside, should be the example.
Well, you make an important statement there. The clergy, some would also add that politicians are a microcosm of a society, a reflection of where the society is. The question I'm going to ask you right now is, what is your reaction when you heard that a junior officer or a band of junior officers in Mali arrested a duly elected civilian head of state? What was your reaction?
I mean, it's very unfortunate that we had to get to this point where this old evil of Africa is resurfacing, where you have men in uniforms taking over power from civilians. This time, even it's duly elected civilians. But now, while we lay blame on the military for their involvement in civil matters, we should not forget that some of these civilians, although duly elected, fell short of meeting the expectations of the people. And again, we are living in a society where politicians, I mean, African politicians, should understand that the human being should be at the center of their actions. It should be at the center, at the forefront of all what they're doing. So you had Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta. He came to power. He was elected by the people, made some promises, but never kept to it. He came. I mean, the stories about elections that had to be held that were never held. So he came and strangulated a democratic process that brought him to power. And that was the instigator of the military coming in. Remember, the military came in as a response to the social upheaval that was being led by civilians. So it was the situation in Mali. It's a very tough situation. It's difficult to call out on the military, and I mean, I am not pro-military in no way. My position is that there is no good coup d'etat. All good coup d'etat are bad. But again, when you are dealing with despots, anything can happen. And that's what we're seeing with Mali. Unfortunately, for Mali, with all its historical artifacts, with Mali that we as Pan-Africanists, we venerate, knowing that that was the center of, of education in the world, in antiquity, with the University of Timbuktu. That's where we had the first university in the world, in Timbuktu. Many people don't know that. That is a cradle of intellectual propagation. But that's where we are with Mali today. It's regrettable.
Reverend Pastor Kennedy Ejacha. Ladies and gentlemen, you are watching Chat Night Africa. And on the platform now is a good friend. He is equally very, very vehement on matters of African politics, especially when they're going the wrong way. This is Mr. Eugene Pehua Pelema, correct?
Yes, That's correct, Divine. Thank you.
That's my friend from the Central African Republic. Eugene, when you hear that a military gets involved in settling political disputes, how do you feel like as an African?
No, I mean, Divine, if I can, quote Professor Ben Bongon and Reverend Kennedy, we have to look first at the history of Africa. Most of African countries were colonized after the Berlin Conference. And during that colonization, it was mainly slavery. People were forced to work in the to produce like cotton, all the things that Europeans need for their market. So people were mistreated, and especially I'm from a French-speaking country. Most of the people didn't have access to education. Their job was just to work and cultivate stuff or in the mine to provide the resources to European countries. So at the end, Professor Ben Bongan said, in 1960, a lot of sub-Saharan African countries got their independence. Most of them from the French-speaking country. The French gave them the independence, but they have no plan to let them independent. So there were very few African people from those countries trained who went to school to the higher level. And most of them, those who were able to go to school, were formatted in school in France, and they were coming back in the country. They have tried to do democracy, and very quickly, French have done putsch. They have done coup. They remove all those leaders, and they replace them with guys that went to military school in Paris, and that's the way they have brought neocolonialism without the French physically, but we have guys that have been trained in their school. And they were putting pressure on those people from 1960 to 1990, 91, when à La Baule, a city in France, they have now tell African, after forcing them to go to dictatorship, now they have to go to democracy. And then without even preparing the people in Africa who were not prepared, they didn't have a culture of democracy. They were all this time under the dictatorship system. And it has been going on for the last year. You cannot change. I think we cannot blame Africa by the way that our democracy are going for the moment. This is not democracy. So it won't be democracy for a little while.
This is Chat Night Africa, and I'm going to bring up Professor Ben Bongan. Professor Ben Bongan, you are a professor of journalism and political science in the United States. The case of Mali, the military taking over, isn't new at all in Africa. I mean, there have been situations like that in Ghana. We've had situations in Cameroon in 1984 when Paul Biya was almost thrown out of power by a military junta. Well, it didn't happen. I don't know what the reactions today would be if there was such an attempt. There have been several coups d'etats in Nigeria, and you can go on and on and on. Now, when the events in Mali unfolded, I read online, people were like, yeah, fine, great. Isn't there a danger in establishing that precedence that, well, when people are unhappy, the military are unhappy with the civilian government, they're just marching with arms? Can you explain to me what justifies the jubilations, the gyrations by Africans in social media that, yes, this needed to be in Mali?
Absolutely. It is a symptom, whether it was Mali, Cote d'Ivoire, or other countries before. The military intervention in politics is the symptom of what I would call the unfinished independence struggle in Africa. By that I mean that we have been more than 60 years attempting to figure out how to run our countries. One way to look at it is this way. Most of the colonial powers, especially France and those who are still lingering around, have interest in Africa. So we cannot yet talk of independence per se in most of these countries because they haven't come to an agreement on how to organize the institutions, the political institutions of the country. Now, when you look at, if we could just take the example of the United States, it's been 330 years after their independence, still struggling to be, they are still challenged by democratic problems, as we who live here know. So you can imagine in most African countries that are barely 60 years into independence, they have failed to create those foundations of democratic institutions. When the United States, the founders decided, one of the key considerations they had at the time was to say, we have to accept, as the Reverend was saying, that as human beings, we have weaknesses. And we are going to come up with a constitution that is not only for people around 1776, but a constitution that could be there for generations. And that is why they successfully created these institutions that have survived till today. But what do you have on the continent? You have constitutions that change daily depending on who is in power. And even the person who is in power changes them depending on how the wind is blowing. And there is hardly a consultation in this true sense of the word with the population. So you have attempts in 1992 where there was a clamor for national conferences on the continent. Some countries did have national conferences, and I looked at the time almost naively optimistic that here was an opportunity for African countries to begin to establish long-lasting institutions. Guess what? It did not happen. It did not happen. You have national assemblies with presidents of the assemblies and with so-called opposition political parties that are sometimes co-opted by what I call the dominant centralized authority. And you can look from Cameroon to Cote d'Ivoire to Mali, these kinds of dominant structures. If you take, for instance, the case of Cameroon, I would say you had that dominant structure from Ahidjo to Biya. And for all these years, you've had an elite, a dominant elite that is deep-rooted within the system. And you can see that in almost all the African countries. How do you create institutions then?
Professor Benbongan, please hold it there.
Back each another.
Yeah, please hold it there. We have a long distance call from Nigeria. Hello, this is Chat Night Africa.
Hello, Divine. Good evening. 10 p.m. here in Nigeria. Good evening.
Good evening. What's your question to the panelist?
All right. Thank you so much. My question is, I want to appreciate that that pastor, the man of God there. Can you hear me?
Yes. Keep going. We're hearing you. Yes, keep going. We are hearing you.
Okay. Now, my question is the process, the problem we have in Mali. This just happened. This is the second time in less than 10 years. If you could remember, we had this in 2012. Okay, and this is the second time in less than 10 years, and this has been happening in the African countries. And my question is, what are those things we will do to make sure that this leadership is not a family thing? It's not something you just want to go in and dwell in forever. Just understand that you are there to save the people. The primary thing is that you are saving the people and that you can leave at any time. You leave at any time the people want you to leave. You don't decide on when to leave. What are those measures we need to put in place for these leaders to know that the leader, that they are leading the people and the people can decide when they should leave and for how long they can stay? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Where in Nigeria are you calling from, sir?
I'm calling from the beautiful city of Uyo, Akwa Ibom State in Nigeria.
Akwa Ibom State. Okay. Now, extend our regards at Chat Night Africa to all the Adas and the Igwes there.
It's all right. Thank you so much. You're doing a wonderful job, Divine. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Be a good ambassador, a flag bearer for Chat Night Africa, where you are, sir.
Sure. We are promoting Chat Night Africa here in Nigeria, and of course, you know that.
Thank you, sir. Bye-bye. Yes, panel, you want to respond? And at some point, I'm going to bring Mr. Eugene Pehua Telema to also react to what the caller from Nigeria has just said.
Yes, I think, if I may, what the caller is asking, what can be done? And that is a very difficult question because, as I said a while ago, you have these dominant centralized power structures that have made it impossible for the to provide avenues for the population to express themselves. So when a few weeks ago in Mali, people were demonstrating initially peacefully, what happened? The government unleashed the troops, and that is always it. The population is demonstrating peacefully, and it is seen as a threat to the leadership. So what then can be done? So you have the elite, who are the ones determining the future of the country, and the population unable to react. You end up having a situation like in Mali, where junior officers will say, maybe we should be the ones to rescue the country from this elite that is clinging to power. That is not the way political transitions should be, but it is a desperate attempt by a segment of the population who happen to have the arms that are able to effect these changes. It is unfortunate, but that is not how constitutional change should occur. So
thank you.
Do we solve it? Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Now we have Reverend Pastor Kennedy Ejacha. In your opening remarks, you said that you are really not pro-military coups. When you have a civilian president who is abusing authority, living large at the expense of citizens in squalid, desperately squalid conditions, when you have a civilian president whose response to peaceful demonstrations in streets is unleashing his military power, his soldiers, the soldiers at his disposal, what do you expect these people? Why shouldn't these people, the citizens, rejoice when there is a military takeover? Why shouldn't they?
Yeah, I mean, past experience has proven to us that military coups have not always been the solution in Africa, because if we go back into the history of Africa, we look in the 70s and the 80s, you know, if military coups were the solution to African problems, then in the 70s, we would have already gotten that solution for so many countries like Togo, where it was a military coup, Central Africa, you had a military coup in Chad, you had military coup. You know, I can name them from one country to the other, but you want to look at these countries, look at where they are today, we would all realize that, I mean, they didn't get any better than the countries in which there were strong institutions in place to guarantee the free expression of the will of the people. And again, I can understand what's going on in Mali, and we are in a situation where the exception is almost becoming the rule, because military coups should have been an exceptional thing. But within 15 years, and if we want to go back, like within 20 years in Mali, we've had 3 different coups d'etats. And has the situation gotten any better? No, it hasn't gotten any better. So that's why I stand to say that military coups are not the solution. What we should be doing in Africa, we need a total overhaul or transformation of the social architecture of Africa, such that we would have strong institutions, just like Obama said in Kenya. We need a continent of nations with strong institutions rather than anchoring on strong men. Now we have the strong man of Mali, not a strong institution. The military junta is representing the strong men, a group of strong men, and it still sends us back to this idea of oligarchies. You know, this oligarchy you can have them in military suits or in designer suits, but it doesn't still negate the fact that we are dealing with oligarchies in Africa. At times, this gets confused with tribalism.
This is Chat Night Africa, and it looks like...
And, you know, that might be a debate for another day where we will talk about the difference between oligarchy and tribalism. But I really want to dwell on that. And I want to pick on something that Professor Ben Bonga said with regards to strong institutions. Constitutions are very important in laying down the framework for the strong institutions. And when you see what has been happening in Africa, you will realize that people created nations, people got independence, and then and then at a later date, started thinking about how should a nation look like. Take the example of Cameroon. Now, when I'm talking about...
And I was going to take you there.
Yes. Let me take the example of Cameroon, which is home, which I know better. And let's look at French Cameroon, because by then, it's not the Cameroon as it is today. They had their independence, what they call independence, which to me was... It befits imagination for those that call it independence. In 1st of January, they had that thing that they call independence without a constitution. It was after that they crafted a constitution for a country that had already a de facto existence in the concept of nations. Now, the question will be, what was the binding document? Because a constitution, it's simply a document that defines the social relationships, the dynamics that exist between the constituents of that community that we can call a nation. You know, a nation is a social organization, and so the constitution defines a relationship between the people that exist. So now, on the 1st of January, you have a nation with people without a constitution. So what was defining the social relationship in Cameroon? And some historians will tell you that it was the Pacte Colonial, so the colonial pact that France imposed on Cameroon in January 1959. And that's something that goes across the board. I mean, if you look, now you can use the situation in Cameroon as a prototype to understand the logic of independence that was given to Africans. Because if you permit, Mr. Divine Chamukon, let me take a few minutes so that our listeners or those who are watching us can understand the gimmickry that happened around what we call independence in Cameroon. France, that was the governing authority, because Cameroon was a trusteeship, and France and Britain each had portion of Cameroon where they were the governing authorities. So in 1958, during the General Assembly of 5th of December in New York, France readily declared that they wanted to give Cameroon's independence, and they slated a date for 1960. That same France in 1958 was fighting in Indochina against the independence of the Cambodians. That same France was fighting in Algeria. They were fighting the Front de Libération du Peuple, I think FLP, that's the name of the party, if my memory is good. They were fighting against them in Algeria in 1958, when France was saying that we will cede over Cameroon's independence. But now, look at what happened. Because France did not have full authority over Cameroon, that part of Cameroon that France was governing authority over was a trusteeship. So the United Nations had the last word, because they had their trusteeship committee that was managing it. So France could not do whatever they wanted in Cameroon. The only thing that could have given France that possibility to have full control over Cameroon was the end of the trusteeship. So when the trusteeship ended on the 1st of January 1960, then roll in the colonization proper of Cameroon by France. So countries were moving, let me land please. While countries were moving towards independence, Cameroon moved backwards to be colonized by France on the 1st of January. And the document that attests of that colonization is what we call, or what is commonly called in France, Le Pacte Colonial, which is a colonial pact that was signed a month before that so-called independence.
Kennedy Ejacha. Eugene Pehua Pelema, in some of the remarks that you made, you extensively cited France as being the problem, the source of the problem. Well, isn't diplomacy a matter of interest? You defend yourself. If Africa, you get as much as you can from the people you relate with. If Africans decided to be, excuse me, use the word stupid, why should you blame France?
No, it's not about just blaming France. I think the foundation, the French African colonies have been administered by the French government since Berlin, at the conference, Berlin Conference. They took over all those countries. So they were administering the administration, the school system, and the social life. So they were running the country. So the foundation on which we got our independence were not good at all. You take, for example, today, you see the problem with Mali. We forget why Mali is in turmoil. France was the country with the US, the British, and decide to destabilize Libya, to kill Gaddafi. All those weapons from those countries, they brought also Al-Qaeda members from other Arab countries. And for a reason, suddenly all those weapons come in West Africa. You have Boko Haram in Nigeria and Cameroon, and then you have Al-Qaeda in all the country close to Algeria. So the President Keita was president at the time where it was a lot of struggle. People were dying, soldiers were dying, and we have what we had. But to come back to your question, if you don't have a good foundation, if you don't have the right people to build a democratic system, you're not going to be able to be successful. The people that have been even winning election, they don't come to serve their country. They have been formatted to serve France. For a lot of them, a lot of our politicians, they have the French citizenship. That generation, they are part of those secret organizations like the Freemason, and they are more aligned to serve the interests of those groups than serving the interests of their country. So when you have young people, even today, a lot of people travel overseas to go to school. They're not coming back in the countries. So you have those who are home that want to keep their interest. It's a very little group of people. In meantime, the real people are paying the price. So that's what I'm saying. We have a part of responsibility. We have to work to train new people, new leader at every level, military, medical, every level, to be able to build those strong institutions that we're talking, the two predecessors. And I have to remember, when French has their revolution in 1799, they came, they removed the monarchy, and they went back to a dictatorship under Napoleon, and that happened twice. So not once, twice before they got the first republic. Not the first republic, but they got the real democracy. So there is a struggle in Africa to get that democracy, because a lot of the people that was running the country early in the 60s were removed from power, like Sylvanio and Olympus in Togo, that was killed just because he wanted to get out of the CFA zone to run his country, and he was killed. So I mean, I think we're going to have more time, but this is the reason. A wrong foundation is not going to give you a democratic system. So I'm not going to condemn totally. I understand why the people in Mali are very happy of the removal of Keita, because too many people died during that war with Al Qaeda. The French are pumping the resources of Mali. They're present, and we don't understand exactly what is their responsibility and what's going on over there. That's the problem. It's the same thing with Boko Haram in Nigeria.
You are watching Chat Night Africa, and on the platform now is Mr. Pelema, Pehua Pelema, and Eugene, and we will be coming back on this and many more. When the president of Ivory Coast, Alassane Ouattara, told the world that it was high time he left the presidency for a younger generation, everyone applauded. I did. Little did anyone expect Alassane Ouattara to reverse course. Not too long ago, we will be taking some calls. Let me see if we can take this a long distance call. Hello, this is Chat Night Africa. Yes, sir. Please, can you hold up on your question, please? Can you hold up? Can you please call back? Thank you. This is Chat Night Africa, and we're broadcasting this show from Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. Here is what Alassane Ouattara said.
J'ai décidé de ne pas être candidat à l'élection présidentielle. Je voudrais vous annoncer solennellement que j'ai décidé de ne pas être candidat à l'élection présidentielle.
Okay. That is the man himself. That is the man himself making the statement. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear him one more time. Alassane Ouattara.
À une jeune génération.
Very good. He's in essence saying that he decides that it's time, the young generation take office. And that sounded plausible. I mean, everybody was applauding. So what happened? Professor Ben Bongang, can you read into the mind of Alassane Ouattara? I mean, what went on? What first make him think that he should say, hey, look, guys, it's time I go and let the young people take over? The constitution of Ivory Coast doesn't allow a third term for whatsoever reason. What is happening with African heads of state? And this is not unique to Cote d'Ivoire. Ben Bonga.
Okay. First of all, when he made the statement and people were applauding, personally, I said, we fall into the trap of these dominant leaders. It is as if they owned the countries and they decide, okay, I want to go get some rest so I can give over the country. Nobody owns a country. The country is owned by the people. In other words, if I can, I will address that in a second, but let me just put this for us who teach political science. The first day in class, you want students to understand what it is that politics is about. And one of the simple definitions we give is that politics is about who gets what when, and how. Who gets what, when, and how. And you can begin to look at that in the context of countries. So inherent in politics is conflict. People, several sectors of the population want something in the country. And in Africa, not only people within the country want their piece of the pie, as it were, the colonialists who left have their own interests as well in the same country. So when a president, because we've come up with these constitutions, says, and the constitutions have been attempting to limit terms, and I would say term limits, as far as I'm concerned, is not the political solution to the dysfunction of African states. The only fundamental changes will come when people will actually sit and say, how do you fundamentally change the African state? You change that by first accepting that the institutions that are created are such that can be challenged by others. In other words, you create systems of checks and balances that create a political culture. By that I mean a way of functioning politically that is accepted by everybody. That takes a long time. But until those institutions are created, where we know, for instance, that the National Assembly has certain powers, that the president has limited powers. In short, any system of government that does not create limits to the exercise of power by certain entities is bound to fail. Limited governments, limited powers. The president cannot be the person deciding what he wants about the future of the country. There should be a way to check the president. There should be a way to check parliament. There should be a way to check the other institutions. But all these systems should be accepted and created within the constitution. Anything short of that is bound to create the kinds of things we're having in Cote d'Ivoire, in Mali, and unfortunately will continue to have in a lot of African countries.
This is Chat Night Africa, and apparently we have somebody trying to reach us in the studio with a question. I'd like to inform our viewers that the lines are now open and they can call. This is Dr. B. Tagzong Pomodam. Hello, doctor.
Hello, good day, sir. How are you doing today?
Fine, fine, ma'am. Your question or comment?
Okay.
Your question?
Hello?
Yes, I'm listening to your question or comment, please.
Well, yes, sir.
I
actually was following the show, and I was going to make a comment when the Reverend Ejacha spoke. And
if I may interrupt you, ma'am, you may want to dial back because you are breaking up. If you may want to go to a point in your home or where you are, so that where you have good connectivity, please, you're welcome to go there and dial back.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes, yes, Dr. Ben Bongang. Dr. Ben Bongang?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, I interrupted you because there was a call coming. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just underscoring the fact that until credible institutions that are based on checks and balances, on the fact that power should be limited, there should be institutions that check each other, and that should be acceptable by the people. The Constitution shouldn't be a document created by the dominant power alone.
Okay, I have a quick question from Nigeria, if you don't mind.
Yes.
Doc, I'll be right with you. I have a quick question from Nigeria. Please, 1 minute, your question. A few seconds.
Okay, please, quickly, Mr. Divan, let me quickly, and I would love Mr. Reverend Kennedy Ejacha to please listen to this question, because I know he will give me an answer. Please, Mr. Kennedy.
Yeah, he's listening.
If you watch the video, that showed when Keita was arrested, Are you listening to me, please?
Yes, go ahead. We're just giving you space to speak.
All right. Okay. Now, if you watch the video that shows how Keita was arrested in Mali, okay, you will see how the people were jubilating, were so happy because he was arrested. Now, my concern is in the action of ECOWAS. ECOWAS has strongly condemned the undemocratic change of government as it is against the ECOWAS protocol on democracy and governance, according to them. So now, in the statement, they said the military action will impact negatively on peace and stability in Mali and in the sub-region. And because of this, they had to block the borders of, Mali with other African countries. So now I want to understand what ECOWAS is trying to do. Are they not in terms with what just happened? Are they happy that are they not happy that Ibrahim Boubacar Keita has been removed as the president? Because if you watch the video, Mr. Kennedy, I want you to pay attention, please. If you watch the video, you see how people were rejoicing, were so jubilating because the president was removed. But this is another action taken by ECOWAS saying they are not happy that the president was removed. I don't know if I get things mixed up somewhere. But I want to understand why this sudden move by ECOWAS at this critical point. Thank you. Jerry Johnny from Nigeria.
Okay, thank you, Jerry from Nigeria. Yes, and before all of you answer, and Eugene, please take note. Eugene is in the waiting room. Take note. When you looked at the reactions by members of the ECOWAS, that's the West African Economic Community, you're wondering what they're really up to. Because here is also Alassane Ouattara, who is talking about sanctions against Mali because of the coup d'etat. On the surface, it sounds right. But this is Alassane Ouattara who is ready to violate his own constitution that limits him to 2 terms in office. Pastor Ejacha, is that hypocrisy or what? What is it? How do you call that? And then respond to the caller from Nigeria.
Yes, I mean, I would not go up to qualifying that as hypocrisy. There is one thing that I want to lay out right up front. It's the fact that 2 wrongs don't make a right. Mr. Ibrahim Boubacar Keita, in his management of the affairs of this country, violated democratic principles. He surely violated his oath of office, which was wrong. Now, having the military step in to take over power, it's another wrong. So, from that position, I don't know if you are getting me.
Yes, I get you. I don't find any problem. I get you.
Okay. Yes. So, thank you. If you go from that postulate, you would understand that we cannot encourage coup d'etat. ECOWAS cannot encourage coup d'etat because within the framework of institutional transition in ECOWAS and any country in the world, military coup d'etats are not recognized as such. But now, what is going on is it's some sort of diplomacy and not hypocrisy. So there would be an overt diplomatic position that these people will lay out, and covertly they will be working with the military to make sure that things go back to normalcy. If people start celebrating coup d'etats, what we will be instituting or institutionalizing is the fact that whenever there is a social crisis, the military is part of the solution. No, this is an exceptional measure. I know that whenever exception takes the rule of the day, we should be very cautious on how we pronounce ourselves, lest we adapt it, and it will be something that it's going to. The theatrics of it is not good for our democracy. It's not good for where we want to be. So now let's always remember, let's not have a fixation on where we are and forget where we want to be. Let's in everything be guided by the vision that we have. And the vision is what? We want a society in which the institutions, as Professor Ben Bongan put, institutions will play their role. There will be check and balances. Transition will be something that's normal from one generation to the other, from one political ideology to the other. It will be the supreme will of the people. And that's what ECOWAS is trying to echo.
This is Chat Night Africa, and we have somebody on the line, apparently. We have started taking calls. Let's see if we can get that caller on the line. He just indicated that he has some questions or a comment to make. And we have still on the, let's see, I think the caller's on the line. Hello.
Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
You can decide to identify yourself or speak anonymously. That's fine.
Caller on the line.
Now, you want to turn off any other listening device where you are, please?
Okay. We have still on the, let's see.
Okay. I think it's fine.
Yeah, can I ask a question?
Yes, please. Go ahead. Yes, please. Go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Divan, and thank the man of God and the professor and the other
Eugene Pelema. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you all so much. I'm actually getting a whole lot of knowledge from what I'm listening to you guys, but I just thought that maybe I contribute a little bit what I know. I don't think any of us really like military takeover in Africa. But if you look at the way the civilians are doing, they are behaving even worse than the military. Maybe we need some, I don't know where the point really comes from. The Cameroon case that the man of God talked about before, the French hurriedly gave independence to them because they could not stand UPC. UPC was making a better case for Cameroon, but they did not because they wanted a system that they could exploit. Just like my friend from the other friend from Central Africa.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So the foundation that they created that was that of exploitation. So the population don't actually have an outlet that can actually debate to create those institutions we're talking about. If you, the country that we're living in the U.S., I'm calling for the U.S.
Okay. Are you still on the line, sir? It looks like he's gone. Hello? Okay, looks like he's gone. All right, yes. How do you react to what he just said? He did not identify himself, but I think we got the essence of what he really wanted to say.
Yes, he raised a very important issue here that Mr. Eugene Pelema had also raised, and that I will re-echo. There's something that's known as social engineering, because people keep telling us all the time, why do you keep blaming France or blaming the colonial masters? No, the colonial masters, they came in place and they built institutions that transform the social or the psyche of Africans. That's social engineering. It's a whole science. That's why psychology is a science. With psychology, you can transform, and it has been proven that you can transform a human being to think anything. So now, when these guys, this European came in Africa, they chose the weakest amongst us, formatted them psychologically. That's why I'll take clearly the French system, the French colonial system in Africa was predicated around indirect rule, and the components of the indirect rule were geared such that there was a social divide within the African communities that the French colonized. You had, on the one hand, those that were called the évolués, and on the other hand, you had the indigènes, which means the indigenes. So the évolués were those that had successfully gone through the psychological formatting of the French and had passed a psychological test that testify of their alienation, that they are alienated themselves as Africans. So it's very key and fundamental that you understand that there was science that was put in place to transform the psychic of Africans that the French gave power to. So now we had a situation where it was black collar people with white-minded spirits that were put at the head of these African nations to continue or to perpetuate the colonialism. And I give you a simple example. When we talk about anti-Semitism, just look how it happens. And this is why we Africans should learn from this. When you talk about anti-Semitism, the Jewish are very sensitive to that. You cannot come and tell the Jews that some of them collaborated with the Nazis, because it is understood that any Jew that handed a Jew to the Nazis did that not out of their normal senses. They didn't do that out of, their will. They were compelled to do that. There were other external factors that were acting on the Jews that gave or betrayed the other Jews. And it's the same thing that has to come down with the Africans. The Africans are the only one that when you point to them that we were exploited, they will turn and tell you that, why keep blaming? The Jews, when they say that they were exploited, they all agree on that. And that's why they have reparation. They went on to paying reparation to the Jews for what they suffered. But that's Africa that was spoliated. There was a whole gang up in 1884 with the Berlin Conference from June of 1884 to January of 1885. Can you see how long it took for the Europeans to craft the colonization of Africa? It wasn't a one-day thing. They had to put in all their savoir-faire on how to subjugate Africans.
I'm going to, yes, I want to bring in Mr. Eugene Pehua Pelema. But before Eugene comes on for us to get his views, let's once again listen to President Alassane Ouattara announcing that he will not be running for a third term, which, by the way, the Constitution doesn't allow, but who all of a sudden changed course, reversed course. Here is Mr. Alassane Ouattara.
J'ai décidé de ne pas être candidat à l'élection présidentielle du 30. Je voudrais vous annoncer solennellement que j'ai décidé de ne pas être candidat à l'élection présidentielle du 30. À l'élection présidentielle du 31 octobre 2020 et de transférer le pouvoir à une jeune génération.
Mr. Pelema, did you applaud when you hear that? When you heard that?
No, I mean, it was a great news, but to come back on Ivory Coast, because you were saying something earlier that the Constitution doesn't allow him to go for a third time. But let me tell you something. In 2010, when he was elected, it was at that kind of Constitution, but they modified the Constitution in 2016, where they add the vice president, and the terms that they put in that Constitution was very ambiguous. And in fact, it looks like it was a new starting of his political life. He could have been a candidate. And remember, in that declaration, he said he's not going to run in 2020. So how come he can think about running about 2020 if he didn't, change the Constitution? They left terms in the new Constitution that allow him to be a candidate in 2020. The problem, what happened in 2010 after the war in Ivory Coast, the FP of Laurent Gbagbo, refused to take part to the political life of Ivory Coast. So they were not part of Congress. So the two groups that were really doing the politics at the time was the PDCI of Houphouët-Boigny, and BJ was the president, and the RDR of Ouattara. And in 2015, when the API came back and tried to get back in the Congress, they were in a large minority. PDCI and RDR, called RDR, were having the majority in that assembly. And what's happening is there was a negotiation between Bédié and Ouattara about putting the mention of having only two terms retroactive, so it's going back. Ouattara was able to convince Bédié not to put it, and they accepted to go that way. And that's why when the guy that was supposed to run for the RDR, Gon, died, it was nobody else to put and to replace Gon. And that's the problem of all our party, because Bédié is 86. He doesn't want to let a young person to go. Gbagbo is 75. Everybody in the FP, they say nobody but Gbagbo. So you cannot build strong institution if it's only the dinosaur, they just stay in power. And that's the problem that we're having actually in Africa.
Reverend Ejacha, and I'm going to come in with this question. How can you explain the case of Alassane Ouattara making a 360-degree turn without caring to remember the civil war that his country a few years back had just gone through? What happens that people all of a sudden simply forget? I mean, how do you explain this? Greed or what? How did he even come about even thinking or coming to make the statement that he would have to leave the office for a younger generation before reversing course? Reverend Ejacha.
Yes, I think the first thing is, the best description that we can give to that is gullibility. Human beings are gullible. My brother Palema said something very important earlier on, where he said, how would you even tell people that you will not run in for a third term when a third term is not even a possibility, and they start applauding? That would have, the idea only even of talking about that should have been considered as treasonable, of you even thinking about it to say that you will not do it. That's sheer evil. So now, what will motivate these people? The first thing is, he knows that he has the support of what they commonly call the metropole. That's France. It is France that brought him in power. It's not the people of Cote d'Ivoire. And France is still ready to back him. They remember, Mr. Gbagbo was bombed out of his palace in order for Ouattara to take over in 2010. And that same France is ready to support him. So now, he doesn't care about his people. And maybe that's why he is very worried about what happened in Mali. And then the next thing is, how would people in Ivory Coast accept this? They have no choice. The people have no choice, because we have missed our revolutions in Africa. It's all about individual. It's all about, it was Bédié, it was Gbagbo, it was, or it's either Ouattara himself. And Gon would have been a mascot, Amadou Gon Coulibaly. And I'm very sure, and it's speculation, and I really want, I'll make this disclaimer before I say this. I'm very, very sure that these people had Amadou Gon Coulibaly's medical record, because it's possible, based on science, to assess somebody and say, they can give you a diagnostic, and with the prognostics that it's true, man is not God. But many times they have given prognostics based on medical health and the degradation of people's health, and those prognostics have been valid. So I'm very sure that these guys knew that Koulibaly could not hold that pressure and be alive. Either he will die or he will be paralyzed or something dramatic would happen. And finally, something dramatic happened. And now he has the leeway. Why can he not even give the way for the guy that he just appointed a prime minister? That is his boy, Bakayoko. Yeah, if you are very interested and keen about passing power onto a young generation, Koulibaly, if you can trust Bakayoko to manage your government, to be the prime minister, then why can't you trust him to be a president in a country where we have institutions in place to manage the affairs of the country? And we're going back, Nidi, just 1 second.
Okay.
And we're still revolving around this notion of, well, we needed a strong man. He was not able to groom somebody strong. No, his failure is that he didn't put in place the institutions that could have permitted for any Ivorian, every citizen of Cote d'Ivoire, I don't know how many millions they are, but every citizen should be a potential president in a country where everything is well arranged.
Now, Eugene Pehua Pelem, I'm going to ask you this question at some point, because earlier on, Reverend Ejacha, and rightly said, a situation that you find at the helm of a state is most likely, and I'm paraphrasing, a microcosm of the country. Is it an African problem in the sense that the leadership reflects the state of thinking? Because these leaders don't come from space, they don't drop from the skies, they are from among us. You can take the case of Uganda and Yoweri Museveni. You can take the case of Sassou Nguesso. You can go on and on. That's why some people are saying, well, maybe not really much of an external influence. Take, for example, France trying to do things around in Africa, push people around. What is our mindset as Africans? Are we ready to take the job at the helm of the state if we became leaders? Because when Alassane Ouattara says it's time to give space for the new generation, how are we sure also that the new generation isn't just going to be a reflection of the people making way? Eugene Pehua Pelema.
Yes, I mean, like you have said, it's the problem that we're having an old generation that was shaped a certain way to run countries. That's the first thing. Secondly, most of those presidents, you have to remember, big corporations from overseas are controlling those people. They cannot make decisions. It's about gold, it's about oil, it's about many, many other interests. And sometimes they follow to those people. And when you talk about the new generation, which one? Because mostly people, I can say, that are like in their 40s already, you cannot call them the new generation. You might go all the way down, maybe early 20, and even there, some of them already tasted the corruption of the system. But one thing can make a difference. Africans are tired to be pushed away. You cannot get a visa to travel. You cannot do anything. Some people are trying to go through the sea. You don't have a job home. You're struggling. And I think this can be the wake-up call for the African leader, because people are tired of it. Reverend Kennedy was saying something about, the army. The problem in a lot of African countries, you have two armies. You have the Republican Guard, the one really close to the president. They have all the advantages. And you have the National Army, you see. And the Republican Guard, they get the salary every month. The National Army, they might not get all the money every month. And in the case of, I have to talk about Mali, because Mali is coming there. That's why you have that group of military guys that, in certain way, back up the uprising of the population. They have been doing things for a month now. And the president was not listening because he's under the control of those corporations, French corporations that have business in Africa. And that's why people might be tempted to support population to remove the president. Officially, but what I heard today, they're not supposed to last. They're supposed to organize this transition and have a new civilian government. But this is the problem that we're having. And as I say, until we train the people to run the country for the interests of the country and serve the nation, we're going to have again and again the same thing. You're going to have strong men, and you have to remember, for example, if you go to the village, you have the chief of the village. He's a strong man. When he talk, he has talk, and people have to listen. And I think this is also transpiring on leadership in Africa. But at the end of the day, the problem is those presidents in Africa, they don't have the power. They're under the control of France, mainly those French-speaking countries. They are under the control.
Reverend Ejacha, we're talking about France and her former colonies. What about Uganda? What about Uganda and Yoweri Museveni?
I mean,
did the same thing?
That's the exception to the rule. I mean, I know you would quote Uganda. You can even quote Djibouti.
Right.
Djibouti has a little bit of French coloration, and there's. I mean, when you see
Rwanda,
but no, Rwanda also has French. They're drifting away from that little bit of French coloration. You know,
but remember, they become Anglo-Saxon because the Kagame and all these people, they were raised in Uganda for 40 years before coming back.
Exactly. You know, I mean, you also had Burundi with Nkurunziza that changed the constitution. You had Chad with Idris Deby.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so it's very pathetic. But now and again, I don't want to sound excessively alarmist about Africa as if it is an African thing. Let's not forget the other giant where you have in Russia,
China,
North Korea, but the case in hand is the one with Russia, where you have Vladimir Putin that gave way for Medvedev because he has exhausted his mandate, could not run, then created an opportunity for Medvedev to come in.
And then turn around and came back.
And he's changing his constitution also. Because it's changing. And I think he already changed it.
But yes, if I may follow up, Kennedy, when you heard Alassane Ouattara talk about the new generation, is it time for the old guard to make way for the new generation? You are likely going to say yes. Remember when Paul Biya took over in Cameroon? He was a young guy.
Yeah, see, I differ a little bit because I wasn't going to say yes. Because
okay, go ahead.
In my thinking, and that is where they are distracting us with this generational talk.
Okay,
you can take somebody, and Mr. Eugene Palima rightfully put it. You can take somebody of 20 years who has tested in the corrupt system, and he will be no different from somebody of 85 years who is part of the system. It's like a cankerworm. When it attacks you, it infests you. Now, you can have somebody of 80 years, like Mandela. Mandela was an old person. You put him in what generation? It's a mindset. It's more about people's mindset. Let's not bring it to a generational debate, because when we bring it to a generational debate, we might lose sight of people of a certain age who have a certain credibility that can bring us a positive push and just go in for somebody just because of his youthfulness, whereas ideologically he's not cut off from that old way of thinking. For instance, I would say in Cote d'Ivoire, where would you put Gbagbo? Where would you, is it old generation or new generation? But when I look at Gbagbo and I look at his politics and I look at some of the policies that he was implementing that turned the French against him, I can say that he's transgenerational. You know, you have some transgenerational people who are not defined by their age, but it's something that should be from the ideological prism.
Gentlemen, we're supposed to be here for 90 minutes. The last question I'm going to ask both of you is, we talk about mindset, and that's very important. Mindset transformation. How do we get there? Because mindset in societal change, in my view, is something like communications to all relationships. So how do you change the mindset? with what?
If I may,
Yes, Eugene. Yes.
very, very quickly.
Yes. How do you change
I think
mindsets?
this is the target. I think this is what we have to work on. We have to train and educate a lot of young people, creating social economics, how you call that, opportunity for them not to fall in that corrupted system. Because until we train people from the younger age, not when they get 20, at the level of school, we have to put school to train people from the younger generation to understand that they're part of the country. When they want to run for a public office is to serve the people, not to come and serve themselves. That's the first step. And then I think if we do that and we have enough people together that think the same way, we can change the environment, the total socio-economical and political environment. Until there, we are going to go in circle and we're going to have the same people because no matter the generation, they are corrupted from long time ago and they're going only to serve their stomach. That's the problem.
Kennedy Ejacha, how do you change mindsets? You are from Cameroon. If you were president of the Republic of Cameroon today, what would be your first acts in office for the first 100 days?
My first act in office, and I mean, when I was anticipating some few years ago that I was going to be candidate for the presidential election in Cameroon in 2018, because I had thought about it very seriously, that's just a side comment. However, I said this, in the first 100 days, there are things that we can do where you would not have to put a cost to it. Because remember, when you put any plan, you have to cost that plan. We already have institutions in place. We have a parliament in Cameroon. We have a judiciary system, but you should render them operable. So I would join Professor Ben Bonga, who was with us earlier, in what he said about check and balances, having strong institutions in place. So I would put everything, I would send a bill in parliament within my first day in office. I'll sign a bill that I'll send in parliament for deliberations and adoption that would put strong guidelines with regards to reinforcing the independence of the judiciary vis-a-vis the legislative and the executive, as well as the independence of the executive vis-a-vis the judiciary and the legislative, and same thing for the legislative. Once you have that check and balances in place, everything else would fall in place. Because remember, if we have strong institutions, we can have a nation of 25 million people with the potential of governing using the institutions, because the institutions stand as yardstick. They stand as guiding lamps. They stand as the compass to the sailor. You can be the best sailor in the world, but if you don't have a compass, it will be very difficult for you to make your way to the right destination.
Reverend Ejacha, you are a reverend gentleman. I'm going to ask the same question to Eugene. Somebody listening to you would say only Jesus Christ can do that. Here is the thing why I say this. You were talking about putting institutions in place. Who will do that? You in power, already taking advantage, benefiting from the bad institutions. Why would you change institutions that work against you, even if they are good institutions? And I think that's the problem.
Yeah, I mean, before us, people did it. I mean, the founding fathers of a great nation like America, they were selfless. They did it. And let's not lose hope. In our countries, they are very good people. They are very right-minded people, just like you, Mr. Divine Chamuko. I can trust you with so many things. I can trust you to do things that journalists in your position in the past have not done. You are not the first Cameroonian journalist to have immigrated to the United States. Am I right or wrong? But now you are. Yeah, you are.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Doing something out of selflessness because one, nobody pays you to do this. Oh, I know how dedicated you were. The number of times you called me, even when you don't have me on the phone, even when I gave you a false, and I'm sorry about that, I gave you a rendezvous that I could not meet, that could amount to something like a false rendezvous, but you were persistent in doing that. So we have right-minded people in Africa. It's just that we've never had the chance of them having the opportunity to be where they should be. So once we will have the right people in the right place, then Africa will be on the right course.
Eugene Pelema, we're talking about mindset transformation. We're talking about putting the right institutions in place so that you have strong institutions, not strong men. But again, I'm going to ask you the question. The people who should put the strong institutions in place are already enjoying power, because power is as sweet as sweet wine. Why should you expect somebody enjoying this sweet wine to just all of a sudden give it away? We don't have too many Mandelas in Africa, do we?
No, I think we do. But the problem is maybe the people they don't have maybe the courage to come out. That's the problem, And that's the problem a lot of black people in general. It can be in the USA or everywhere. We are scared to die for a cause. Nobody wants to pay the price for the other people. You go from the founding father in America, the one in Russia with the Lenin, the one with China with the Mao, and the Meiji in Japan, the Robespierre in France. They all try to do something. But in our case, we don't work together. Maybe because we were break down the way that
I'm not interrupting. My apologies, Reverend Ejacha. Please begin to prepare for your last word for 2 minutes. Yes.
So this is, we have to work for the replacement of the leadership in Africa. The only way to do that, we have to train people. Institutions, they're not going to come alone. They need people to put it together. They need people to respect the institution. For example, we don't have in most of African countries security clearance. People can get access to some information because of political view that we take it out to the people. Everybody can see that, so they don't care. They don't have principle. We have to train the people that way. It's not going to change overnight. It takes time, and like Reverend Kennedy said, it will be people that will come because unfortunately we need somebody to get at the top to be able to bring other people that think like him to change the system from the inside. It's not going to happen overnight. If every time the person just come for their own interest, there will be no change in Africa for a while. But I strongly believe that this is the time of the turnaround from Africa. Since that COVID-19 started, they're having some stuff that you can see. There are something that is happening in Africa. A lot of young people are tired of this situation. We are, fed up by this nonsense where all the resources are on our continent. The people take everything, but our people are going and die in the sea. I think people are awakening in Africa. It's just a question of time. We have to work. We are part of Pan-African groups, and believe we're not sleeping. We are working. This thing will come. Is a price. It's not going to, some people think that Africa is going to change in 2-3 years. No, it takes time. It takes time. America become America.
I'll come back to you for your last word.
3 years.
I'll come back to you for your last word. Now, we will take the concluding statements from Reverend Kennedy Ejacha. Your last word, sir.
Yes, my last word. Let's all remember that most of African countries have been existing as nation states for about 60 years only. Rome wasn't built in one day, and that's not an excuse that I'm making for where we are today. A lot of progress has been made in terms of the conscientization of the African people. A lot of progress. Let's not lose sight of the progress that has been made. There is a new breed of Africans that's coming up, but we have to continue pushing until we will get to that point where, in physics, it is called the break point. And once we will get to that break point, everything is going to rule. We will have the snowball effect and everything. So let's keep hope. There's a bad grain. If we keep fighting the just cause, one day justice is going to rule down like a river, and it will take over everything. It will take, as Martin Luther King said, the arc of the moral world is long, but it bends towards justice. Yes, that arc is very long, but it is bending towards justice. Our journey is going to be a long journey, but if we keep leading this fight, this journey will definitely take us to our destination. And our destination for Africa is a society where Africans are united, where social justice is a reality. Social justice will not just be for a few, it will be for everybody. That is why we are spending sleepless nights. That is why we could sacrifice to be on platforms like yours to make our voices heard. You know, this is an example, just being on this platform. It is an example that is attesting to the fact that things are happening. We might not be seeing it at this, it might not be happening at the pace at which we want them to happen, but slowly, steadily, and surely we are making our way. Our voices are being heard. At first, it was just, the media was stifled. It was being owned by the dictators, the despots. But now, guess what? From my room in the United States of America, I can reach out to thousands and thousands of my compatriots in Cameroon, something which 10 years ago was not a reality. So just think about it, where we shall be 10 years from now. If we look at where we were 10 years ago, progress is being made.
Thank you, Reverend Kennedy Ejacha. And now we get the concluding remarks from Mr. Eugene Pehua Pelema. Eugene, your last word, sir. Yes, Eugene, we are listening to you. We seem to be losing our connections with Eugene. Do you hear me, sir? Apparently, we've lost connections with him, even though we can have his image on the platform. We thought we would be able to get the last statements, concluding remarks from Mr. Eugene Pehua Pelema. Once again, sir, do you hear me? Your last words. Unfortunately,
thank you, Divine. Thank you, thank you, Divine. I think for me it would be a call. I invite Africans that follow that show, and I'm sorry.
No, I was asking for your last words.
Yeah, I do. That's good. Yes, I just want to call African to be hopeful.
Unfortunately, we are having trouble connecting with Eugene Pehua Pelema, but I think that he's exhaustively shared. Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Eugene Pehua Pelema. Sometimes when you do these live broadcasts, you're going to have some latency, and it does happen. I want to thank everyone for having been there, sharing this broadcast. I appreciate you. Thank you. And we'll be putting this broadcast in several watch parties. Ladies and gentlemen, we had on the platform today Professor Ben Bonga. We also had the very articulate Pan-Africanist Reverend Pastor Kennedy Ejacha. And we couldn't go without saying thank you, mighty thank you, to Brother Eugene Pehua Pelema from the Central African Republic, residing here in Maryland. Thank you, Eugene. And that has been Chat Night Africa. And we want to thank the caller from Nigeria. We want to thank the caller from Nigeria for taking all the time to call from the beautiful city in Nigeria. We thank all of you who have been online participating in the debate. I could see Shea Tata, Eugene Ate, thank you, and many, many others. Reverend Father Maurice Aqua, we had Nchamukong Kebila, and just so many. I could not name everybody here. Thank you, Dr. Bita Zongfomundam. I want to say thank you to all the production crew. Dr. Bita Zongfomundam, production supervisor. We have my editing and social media platforms manager in Lagos, Mr. Ze Roger Fool. We also had Beatrice Fominin as a studio director. This chat night, the power of chat night. Chat night Africa production assistant Emmanuel Wayindi, Daniel Eno, John Tanto, and Lord Benson. Mumbalingua transmission director Maxi Atu Demonde. That has been Chat Night from Washington DC metropolitan area. Chat Night Africa is compiled and presented by Divine Nchamukong. And until next time, I say goodbye to everybody. Share, tag, invite. Merci à tout le monde. That's how we round off on this week's show. Many more things are coming to Chat Night. You will be watching documentaries and many, many, many other things. Bye for now. Goodbye.
We're gonna dance. I'm coming.